So welcome back to week 2 of the time management course, and this time we're going to be looking at core competencies. So we're going to be looking at organising your time for maximum impact. In week 1, we reset our expectations of what is possible on a day-to-day basis. So we talked about decluttering our intentions, conceptually hacking back at the content that we want to import into our shiny new time management system. I spoke about Oliver Burkeman, who encourages us to accept our limitations and to manage our expectations. And with Hiram Smith, we thought deeply about who we are and what matters most to us, our priorities in life and work, and we decided which principles, goals, and relationships are going to travel with us and find time in our calendar, and which others can be let go, perhaps even just for now. So in week 2 of this course, you're going to set up your calendar with structured work blocks, and you're going to implement planned email checks. You'll start batching tasks and experimenting with focus techniques. So time blocks are ring-fenced, protected packets of time. They're like appointments that you set up with yourself for the future, and they have a theme. They have a particular point of focus. They mean that instead of working reactively and jumping from one task to another as they hit your desk, you proactively assign time slots for focused work. So when you time block, you're making an advanced appointment with yourself to carry out different tasks, projects, or categories of work. This week, I'm going to ask you to choose a calendar, a digital calendar to work with for the purposes of time management. I use a Google Calendar, and that's partly because it works really well and integrates with most of the other systems that I use. But it's also because other members of my family is on the same system, and I can toggle through their calendars and we can cross-refer as a family, which is very helpful. So choose the calendar system that you want to work with. If you're like me, I work best when I've got a routine. So I've time blocked my calendar open-ended into the future as far as I can see, with the same sorts of patterns of daily activity. When we set up themed blocks of time in this way, what we're doing is recognizing our priorities and ensuring that time has been allocated for important work. So I'm going to introduce our third guru now, our third guru of time management, and she is Dr. Claire Leroy of Little Design Corner. She's a hard-working, focused, creative and resolute individual, and I've borrowed 2 concepts from her, and they are the concepts of non-negotiables and work sprints. Based on regular reviews of my business plan and performance, I've designed a list of the daily activities that I believe most powerfully combine to drive my business. I monitor key indicators from my business weekly. In real time, I'm monitoring the true impact of these activities. For me, every day starts with these cornerstone activities because consistent performance over the long run beats spurts and troughs. Regardless of how much energy you can occasionally muster, it's so much better to be consistent and to be steady in your application. The second concept that I've borrowed from Claire Leroy is the work sprint, appointments in my calendar for focused work. What I do during these periods changes every time, and it's directed by my prioritised to-do list. I trust my to-do list to tell me the activities that are most important at any point in the week. Within a time block, the aim is to keep the quality of your product high, but to tick off as many actions as you possibly can within that period of time. And the reason that you might choose to turn this into a bit of a race against yourself is to combat Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that a project is going to expand to fill all the time available. So if you decide that you're presenting to a client in a week's time, you could take that entire week in order to produce the materials that you need. If the client then got in touch with you and said they were pulling the meeting forward by 5 days, you probably still manage to produce all the materials, which would just go to demonstrate that we tend to take as much time over something as there is time available. It's critical not to fall victim to Parkinson's law during these time slots, so think of them as a race against yourself to complete as much good quality work as is possible in the time allocated. In terms of how long they should be, I find that 2 to 3 hours is a good period for me. For that length of time, I can manage to maintain focus and pace, and that gives me enough time to get into the zone in the first place. We've spoken about time blocks called non-negotiables and time blocks called work sprints. You might also regularly work with time blocks that are called planning, or client meeting, or colleague meeting, or site visit, or sourcing and inspiration, or training. In the coming 2 weeks of material, I'm also going to talk to you about monthly planning, quarterly planning, and annual planning. These are also very important, and we're going to come back to these in detail. Okay, so while a calendar view of an ideal day might look like this, in reality, when an emergency arises or an opportunity comes up, you can move things around. The idea is to try to maintain a balance throughout the week and make sure that you get some proper focus time for working slotted in, even if the actual slots get shifted. I've mentioned the theory of scheduling in short slots each day to deal with emails. So checking your emails in the morning, around the middle of the day, and then again before you clock off in the evening. It's quite reasonable for somebody to wait 24 hours to hear back from you, especially if your paperwork and in your meetings you've made this service level clear to your clients. Again, the 2-minute rule applies. If an email is going to take more than 2 minutes to answer, you can let the sender know that you have received their email and maybe even give an indication of when you'll reply. And then this task goes onto your to-do list. I want to talk about task batching. Now, task batching is when you've got little straggly leftovers, so little bitty chores, none of which are going to take you terribly long, but all of which are a bit disruptive if you deal with them one at a time. Task batching is when you recognise you have all these leftovers and you just pop them together and agree to deal with them as a whole at one particular point in time. In this way, you'll get through them quicker and you'll actually get through them. So I mentioned that the things I do every day, my non-negotiables, are blocked into my diary infinitely. I did say we're going to come back to annual and quarterly planning. Dates for these sessions should also be blocked in well in advance of time, just to protect the time and to make sure that they don't get pushed back and back and back, because your business will suffer. Once you've got these staples in, you can do the rest of your blocking during your weekly planning session. Obviously, if you're working on a client project, you'll have calculated your fee for the project based on how much time you're going to be spending on the different parts of the design process. As a bit of a sense check, with the calculations that you did when you worked out your design fees, if you've decided that you're going to be spending 3 hours on sourcing, then when you put a sourcing time block into your calendar, don't let it exceed 3 hours, because otherwise you're going to be starting to work at a loss. For anyone who has integrated a system like Calendly or Acuity into your website to allow clients to book consultations direct into your diary, you need to practice 5-star diary hygiene. You need to make sure that you keep that diary immaculately and that you have protected all the time that you're going to need for your key business management chores. You never know when an unexpected meeting might suddenly materialise. Okay, homework for week 2. In the coming week, I would like you to pick a calendar and, if it's needed, give it a good tidy up. I want you to work out your non-negotiables, the repetitive short chores that your business needs you to commit to daily, and include actively planning your day within this packet of time. Drop a daily non-negotiables time block into your calendar and make sure that that has populated your calendar, stretching out into the future. Then you can drop in all of the fixed appointments that you've scheduled for the coming week as time blocks. In week 3, we're going to build on this foundation with materials on prioritising, procrastinating and perfectionism. And I will look forward to seeing you then.